as far as when we speak of the tariffs that he seems to have announced, this is a brief statement that has now been posted by Donald Trump, where he's announced a 25% tariff, Iran tariff penalty. Countries that are trading with Iran will now be hit by 25% tariff on all U.S. business orders is now coming into effect immediately. And this seems to be a conclusive statement that has now been issued by Donald Trump himself. So let's take a look on Truth Social, saying that effective immediately, any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will pay a tariff of 25% on any and all businesses done with the United States of America. This order is final and conclusive. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That is a brief statement that has been issued by Donald Trump. But as far as when it comes to tariff is now being used again as a weapon, Shinjoy, that we are looking at as far as Donald Trump here is concerned, he seems to be stating that Iran is now approaching a red line. And his administration is considering very strong options, including potential military action if Iran continues using deadly force against protesters, and now tariffs.
Well, to start with tariffs, first of all, India buys very little oil from Iran, if at all. That's the first thing. So if there are tariffs on India, it would not really work because India's trade with Iran is not that high. So India is not the issue. As far as other countries are concerned, Iran has very good ties with Russia. Iran has very good ties with China. I would imagine that Iran sells a lot of its oil to China. And also, Iran sells a lot of kamikaze drones to Russia. Now, the one country that has spoken up about all this is actually Ukraine, because Ukraine stands to benefit if there is some kind of regime change, because this government of Iran currently sells weapons to the Russians.
Please stay on with us, Shinjoy. We're trying to get many reactions on this development. Mr. Fabian, good morning, sir. Well, Donald Trump is back to his favorite word, and this time announcing tariffs. Because this is now, as far as the developments that are happening across the world, 25% tariff penalty has been issued by Donald Trump with any country who seems to be trading with Iran.
Morning. Thank you. We have to look at the main trading partners of Iran. As we know, there is no trade between Iran and there is not much trade, or perhaps no trade at all, between Iran and Western and Europe, because American sanctions, the so-called secondary sanctions, they already apply. Now, the main, as far as I can see immediately, China is has been importing from Iran, and Russia also has been importing from Iran. And the question is how China and Russia will respond to this. And what is slightly intriguing for me is that, how come that these two powers keeping silent and non-active? Because when Iran got into serious foreign exchange shortage, and that is why the real is falling. Well, China could have easily come out with a certain package. And don't forget that China, after 2015, signed an agreement to invest $400 billion in Iran. So let us see how they are going to react.
All right. Mr. Fabian, appreciate you joining us here on the broadcast. Well, Shinjoy, is the eye really on Russia and China, as far as what Mr. Fabian was also suggesting, because China is also Iran's largest trading partners. It is followed by Iraq, the UAE, Turkey, there is also India, but there is not much additional information that has now been shared about the tariffs, including which countries' imports would be hit the hardest.
Yes, as far as India is concerned, India imports very little, almost no oil from Iran. Once upon a time, Iran sold a lot of oil to India, but not anymore. So that's the first thing. India has some trade with Iran, but it is not something extremely important. It's almost negligible. So, or even if it's not negligible, it's very small. So it is something that can be managed quite easily. But as Ambassador Fabian rightly said, Iran has very good economic ties with Russia and China. Now, the Americans would have worked out, or at least decided whether this 25% additional tariff would work or not. So if there is additional tariff on countries that buy and sell goods with Iran, then the country that will be affected most is China and also Russia, and also countries that are close to Iran, whether it's UAE or Turkey or whatever it is.
Yes.
But the two major countries will be Russia and China.
Well, that's the point there, is the eye actually set on them, because he seems to be also countering the adversaries like China and Russia when it comes to his continuous statements that he's given over the purchase of Greenland as well. But as far as these military strikes are now concerned, let's now talk about, because Donald Trump says that this option is also on the table, as the U.S. has now threatened to intervene and has said that the Iranian officials called him to negotiate, but added that we may have to act before a meeting. However, Donald Trump has not yet elaborated, Srinjoy, on what U.S. is considering in terms of military options and why. Not an on and proposed negotiation, despite saying that the meeting is being set up with Iranian officials. But what comes ahead, we don't know.
See, there are two things here. Now, if you're going to negotiate, what are you going to negotiate about? That's the first thing. It's not clear as yet what it would be. Because one thing is clear, that the Americans want the attacks, the violence on the streets to end. Fine. That's a very good thing. But beyond that, what? What do you negotiate about? That's the first thing. The second thing is strikes, airstrikes. Now, Trump has said he doesn't want boots on the ground in Iran, and quite rightly, because that would mean a full-scale war. It would mean huge casualties on both sides. Though, okay, so you want airstrikes. Now, if you want airstrikes, then what do you hit? You've hit nuclear installations in the past. Now, what more do you hit? If you're going to hit bridges, if you're going to hit power stations, you are going to hurt the very people you want to protect, which is the people of Iran, some of whom are on the streets. At best, you can hit nuclear installations, you can hit military targets, but then what? So these are also issues that can be looked at very carefully, because it's one thing to strike, but then after you strike, what happens? What kind of results are you expecting from that strike? So these things have to be made very clear, and we will have to see what the final decision is by Trump and his government.
Because as far as talks on US-Iran nuclear talks that have been also derailed quite a bit, as far as when it comes to these talks that are expected to happen on what issue, what is the when it comes to the standing that the US has over this violence that has been escalating in Iran, can it actually strike militarily speaking? And if there are negotiations on the table, Iran says that it is ready for talks, but it is also ready for war at the same time. Let's in the meantime get you another update, because as violence seems to be escalating, there is a complete communication and internet blackout across Iran as when it comes to the protests that have now entered its third week. Now, there are unconfirmed reports that say that nearly 600 should be the figure that is now approaching of the people, or many of them are activists and protesters who have been killed in the escalating violence. Now, multiple countries have issued advisories. India has also done the same for its Indian citizens there residing in Iran. And US, meanwhile, has issued an advisory for its nationals saying that leave Iran immediately. As far as this advisory that follows, saying that there is violence, there is arrest, and there is feared security measures. As far as when it comes to the situation there that has been developing, of course, Srinjoy, multiple countries that have already invoked this advisory for its nationals.
that is inevitable because every country sees its citizens in serious trouble in Iran, because it's one thing to have violence on the streets. If there are airstrikes after this, we don't know where the airstrikes will be, who will get hurt, what kind of collateral damage there will be. So naturally, it's absolutely important for every country who have citizens in Iran, in Tehran or other cities in Iran, to get them to move out. That's absolutely essential. There's no dispute about that one.
Yes, but there is also growing hostility against the U.S. because Iran has been calling out interference on part of the U.S. in Israel. So all the more, when it comes to such advisories that have been issued, and especially for the U.S. citizens, there might be a sense of fear for them on the ground, because the U.S. here seems to be urging its citizens to exit land via Armenia and Turkey, as it has now been advised by the U.S. authorities there.